All right, so today we're going to talk about something that's, well, it's way more than just a piece of tech. We're actually diving into a story that's been unfolding for decades. It's a story all about privacy, a little bit of rebellion, and this big, big quest to kind of reclaim the soul of the internet. Yeah, we're talking about the story of blockchain. But, to really get why any of this matters, let's just start with a super simple but really personal question. Think about it. Who truly owns your data? I mean, your photos, your private messages, your search history. The second you put all that stuff online, who's actually pulling the strings? So the internet we're all using right now, people call it Web 2.0, it's built on a pretty straightforward model, right? The big platforms, they own your data, and everything is controlled from the center. But there's this other idea, this other vision called Web 3, and it completely flips that script. It's a future where you own your data, where the value created is actually shared with the users, and where control is spread out, decentralized. That is the big promise we're going to unpack today. Okay, so before we can really appreciate why we might need this new promise, we got to look back at how the old one, well, kind of fell apart. Think about it. When the social web exploded, we all became content creators, right? But all that content, I mean, literally our digital lives, it all ended up on these massive centralized corporate servers. And what did that lead to? Well, it created these huge data monopolies where our personal info became the real prize, often getting sold off without us even really knowing or agreeing to it. We get very little say, our data is constantly at risk, and you've heard it before. We ended up being the product, not the customer. But what's really wild is that a group of thinkers, these absolute visionaries, they saw this whole problem coming decades ago. They called themselves the cypherpunks, and they decided they were going to fight back, but not with protests, with the one weapon they knew could actually work: code. And this quote right here from their manifesto back in 1993, it just nails their whole philosophy. These guys weren't just hackers, they were more like digital freedom fighters. Their whole argument was that in this new electronic age, you simply can't have an open, free society unless regular people have the tools to protect their own privacy from, well, anyone watching, be it corporations or governments. So their game plan, their blueprint, was actually super clear. First off, they said cryptography, the science of secret messages, it shouldn't just be for spies and the military. It had to be for everyone. Next, users must have control over their own privacy and their own data. Then, any software built to protect us had to be open source, so the community could actually look at the code and make sure there were no hidden backdoors. And finally, and this is the big one, the systems themselves had to be decentralized. No single person, no single company in charge. Okay, so they had the philosophy down pat, but now came the huge technical hurdle. I mean, how on earth do you build a private, digital form of money that acts just like cash, something you can spend without needing a bank in the middle, and crucially, something you can't just copy and paste over and over again? Yeah, the answer didn't just appear in a flash of genius. It was more like this incredible, almost 20-year-long relay race. You had DigiCash back in '89, which gave us private transactions, but it was still centralized. Then in '97, Hashcash came along and invented proof of work to fight email spam, a piece of the puzzle that would turn out to be absolutely essential. A year after that, B-Money floated the idea of a decentralized ledger where everyone keeps track. And then in 2004, RPO figured out how to make those proof of work tokens reusable. Look, none of these projects succeeded on their own, but each one added a crucial building block, passing the baton to the next. And all of that, it brings us right to the breakthrough moment. The point where that cypherpunk philosophy and all those little pieces from all those different experiments, they finally clicked together to solve one gigantic final problem. And that problem, it's called the double spending problem. It's actually pretty simple to understand. With a physical dollar bill, once you give it to someone, it's gone. You can't spend it again. But a digital file, you can copy it a million times. So the big question was, how do you stop someone from spending the exact same digital dollar over and over again without having a central bank watching over everything? This was it. This was the final boss. And here's the absolute genius of it. The solution wasn't to build a better, faster, stronger central bank. No. The solution was to get rid of the central bank completely. And in its place, a shared public book of accounts, a ledger that everyone could see and that no single person could ever alter. So here's the quick and dirty on how it actually works. Let's say you want to send money. You basically broadcast that request to the whole network. Then a whole bunch of independent computers all around the world check the public ledger to make sure you actually have the funds.
Once they agree, yep, it's legit, your transaction gets bundled together with a bunch of others into a new digitally sealed block. And then, this is the key part, that new block gets chained onto the end of the last one, creating this long, unbreakable, unchangeable chain of history. And just like that, the double spending problem is solved. Why? Because everyone saw it happen, and now nobody can go back and change the record.
You know, in the traditional world, it all comes down to trusting a middleman, right? You trust your bank, your credit card company, whoever. You trust them to keep an honest and accurate record for you. But in this new world, you don't have to trust a person or a company at all. Instead, you trust the code. You put your faith in open source software, in hardcore cryptography, and in transparent rules that literally anyone can check for themselves. And that right there, that is the fundamental shift. We go from trusting people to trusting math. So, as you're probably guessing, this whole thing is about way more than just digital money. It's about taking these exact same principles and using them to rewrite the rules for the entire internet. And this is where our story really comes full circle. I mean, just look at how the web has evolved. First, we had Web 1.0. That was the read-only internet, basically a bunch of static pages you looked at. Then came Web 2.0, the read-write web. Suddenly, we could all create and share content on social media. But the promise of Web 3 is the next logical step, the read-write-own web, a version of the internet where we don't just create the value, we actually have true ownership over our data and our digital stuff. And here's the final kind of crazy twist in all this. The very, very first version of the internet, it was called ARPANET. It was designed by the US military way back in the 60s. And what was its core design principle? Decentralization. It was built as a network with no central kill switch, specifically so it could survive a nuclear attack. Get this, the internet was born decentralized. So that just leaves us with one big final question, doesn't it? After this long detour we took into the centralized world of big tech and Web 2.0, is the future of the internet, this future powered by blockchain, really a new thing at all? Or is it just a return to its original, more resilient and more open roots? That's the massive question that everyone is trying to figure out right now.